Hi, my name is Cliff King, and this week in Congress I'm going through the bills that Congress touched on June 20th. And there were 16 bills that I researched, but I'm only going to do about half of them for the first video, and then I'm going to do a second one. So it's just going to be way too long. But yeah, so I'll get started. So the first bill is H.R. 494. So this is the Frederica National Monument Boundary Expansion Act, sponsored by Earl Carter. So, the bill is exactly what the title says. It expands a national monument. So it did pass the House on the 20th, and it was sent to the Senate for consideration. And what it does is it expands the maximum allowable acreage from 250 to 305. The other thing is the park is actually already at 285 acres, but now it would officially allow it to expand an additional 20 acres that can only be either purchased or donated. So no eminent domain is allowed for the expansion. So there were actually some interesting things around this bill. So, there are two potential land sites that can be acquired. There's a private landowner to the north that bought some property in 2007 for $3.5 million. So, they're very willing to sell because, obviously they basically bought it at the top of the market. And then there's also some land to the south that they believe may have some archaeological significance. So they think that there is a colonial cannon battery there. But yeah, so those are like two potential sites that they can acquire to expand the park. But the important thing is there is no money appropriated to purchase land in this bill. All it does is it expands the allowable area. Simple bill, sure, why not? But next bill, H.R. 625, the Report Act, sponsored by Pete Aguilar. So this bill passed the House on June 20th and waiting consideration by the Senate. This bill seems like a pretty straightforward bill. All it does is, if something is deemed to be a terrorist act by the FBI, then an unclassified report must be provided to Congress as soon as the investigation is finished. So this bill was created in response to the San Bernardino shooting in 2015. But the interesting part of this bill in my research was that there's a lot of, the FBI gets a lot of latitude on what criminal act gets defined as terrorism. So it's kind of hard to say like, oh, this is terrorism, and we're going to get a report from it. For example, the Charleston shooting wasn't deemed to be terrorism, whereas the San Bernardino attack was. So it's kind of hard to say like, oh, this is when we're going to get a report. The FBI has a lot of, sway in like what they deem as terrorism. So the next bill is H.R. 1238, Securing Our Agriculture and Food Act, sponsored by David Young. So this bill was actually passed on March 22nd in the House, and then in the Senate on the 24th. And then on the 20th, what happened was that the two chambers came together to come up with, a resolve the bill. And it did finally get signed into law on June 30th. So there's very little opposition to this bill during passage. What it does is it directs the Department of Homeland Security to focus on defending U.S. food, agriculture, and veterinary systems. Seems like a good bill. This bill was created in response to a 2015 avian influenza outbreak in Iowa. Because there was like a weakness in the government's ability to communicate with the affected parties. So this bill came into existence. The next bill, H.R. 1393, the Mobile Workforce State Income Tax Simplification Act of 2017. This was sponsored by Mike Bishop, and this seems like a good bill. This bill passed the House on June 20th, and again, waiting for Senate consideration. What this bill does is that it makes it so if you work more than 31 days in a different state, then you do have to file taxes there. But if not, then you don't have to. So it makes the taxes much simpler for people who work a few days in a different state every year. So they don't, especially if you're like traveling all around, then it makes it difficult if you have to file like 10 different like tax returns in different states. But there are exemptions for athletes, entertainers, production staff for filming and public figures, or for filming and public figures who get paid per event. So those people still have to file taxes in every state that they do events or that they work in. So this had bipartisan support, and it also has 46 co-sponsors in the companion Senate bill. So it does seem like there is a decent chance that it'll get passed if the Congress can get their act together. And it seems like a good bill. Like, it should help some people simplify their taxes. Who doesn't want that? So the next bill is HR 1551. There is no official short title for this bill, but what it does is it modifies tax credits for the production of advanced nuclear energy. And this was sponsored by Tom Rice of South Carolina. You'll see why in a sec. So this bill was passed on June 20th, and again, waiting for Senate consideration. During my research, I did get kind of stuck on this bill because I was really trying to understand what the state of the nuclear tax credit was. Because there was 6,000 megawatts allocated in 2005, but it doesn't seem like it was used at all. And yeah, so the other thing was, in the original bill, they said that this tax credit had to be used by plants that were operational by 2020. So right now, there are 2 plants currently being built in South Carolina, hence the sponsor, and Georgia. And the thing is that they don't look like they're going to be operational by 2020. So this is really putting into question, or it is putting into question about the viability of the project. And the other wrinkle in that process is under the Obama administration, there was actually $8.3 billion in loans that were guaranteed for these projects. So in a sense, it means that if the tax credits are preventing these projects from actually coming to fruition, then not passing these tax credits could also lead us, the government, from having to guarantee $8.3 billion in loans. So, in one sense, it's like, do we want more nuclear energy? Which I'm kind of a component for. And the other side, or another point, is that, do we want our government to, have to pay $8 billion in guarantees on these loans? So yeah, I'm kind of for this bill, but who knows if Congress will actually get anything done. So the next bill, HR 1654, the Water Supply Permitting Coordination Act, and this was sponsored by Tom McClintock. I had to practice that last name a little bit. So this bill was passed on June 22nd and is waiting consideration by the Senate. This was touched by Congress on the 20th because sometimes Congress will set rules for how the debate is going to go on a specific bill, when it comes up for a vote. So, yeah, so on the 20th, those rules were set. But just kind of going over the bill real quick, this bill is about simplifying the permitting process for federal water storage projects. Because one side is saying, some of these water projects take up to 20 years to build because of all these different environmental checks. They kind of complain that when they think everything is set, environmental groups will find some other agency that wants to do another check on it, and then the process gets even more elongated, increasing like costs and things like that. So, but obviously environmentalists are saying, we're not asking for these checks for like no reason, they're necessary. But I think this bill is a pretty good compromise, because what it's saying is that, once a project comes online, they're going to ask all these different agencies, do you want to do anything? Do you want us to, what do you need for us to, get this project going? Instead of, while the project's going and they think they're done, and then some other agency comes in asking for something. So, they're asking up front, do you need us to do anything? So, but I do kind of wish I, understood what the process is really like, because the only red flag that I had here was that it was a party line vote. But yeah, so that kind of makes me think what's the politics here, But I don't really understand what the process is like, so hopefully one day I can. But yeah, this is the last bill for this video. So HR 2132, the Traveler Redress Improvement Act of 2017, and this was sponsored by John Katko. And this bill was passed on June 20th in the House, and again, waiting for Senate consideration. What this bill does is it gives people a way to get themselves off of enhanced screening by the TSA. So right now, the Department of Homeland Security's Traveler Redress Inquiry Program is available for travelers placed on the no-fly list. There was a whole controversy about that before. People who were placed on that unable to get themselves off of it, and but now what this bill does is it expands it to include people who are potentially erroneously placed on the terrorist screening database. So, again, these people are having to go through enhanced screening every time they travel, just because they share a name or something like that. So, so this seems like pretty common sense legislation, and it passed the House without any opposition. And the CBO estimates that it'll only cost the government about $100,000 a year. So yeah, seems like a good bill, and I hope it passes. I hope Congress gets their act together and does something. So yeah, so that's it for this first video, and then I will take a break and record the second half of June 20th. Thanks.